the Sustainability Management Master's Program, you're answering one simple question. Do you care about your future generation? If you care about your kids, their grandkids, then you care about sustainability. And a sustainability manager is someone who has the tools to make people understand how they can contribute towards developing a sustainable world. We have both part-time and full-time students. Our curriculum is 30 hours. Instead of thesis, we have a research project course and a seminar course which provides them with the kind of research background they will need to be successful in their job. But at the same time, sustainability is not always everything about environment. It also relates to the business. They will take a sustainable business strategies course. They will take a project management course. Most of these courses are going to be taught by industry people, the people who are doing sustainability on a daily basis as a part of their job. Any organization that has a large number of employees and has a physical infrastructure, they will have to have a sustainability office. If you have the passion to develop and maintain a sustainable world, come to us and we will help you shape your passion into a career which will create an impact.
Kellen, all yours.
Thanks. Appreciate it. All right, everyone. So let's make sure this is working. Beautiful. So this is our capstone presentation. This is actually a modified version. This is what we presented to the city of Hoboken when we finished our project and were tasked to basically show the environmental committee of the township what we had done with our work. So this presentation will more so be oriented to what a real world deliverable version would be like. And then we can save the discussion afterwards to help give you guys perspective about how things worked as a team dynamic, coordinating together as a group to accomplish our goals, etc. But our project was entitled Development of a Sustainable Development Goals Index and Dashboard to measure SDG progress for Hoboken. So this was the dream team, consisted of 5 students. So we have Kayla Mahoney, Marco Palladino, Shannon Diaz, and Ava Moraz. They were the sustainability advisors, and myself, Frances Levy, I was the project manager. This project would not have been possible without our mentors from the United Nations Association of the United States of America's North New Jersey Division Chapter, also known as Vision New Jersey 2030. Our coordinators from UNA USA were Dr. Usha Rowe, John Collegian, and Nazreen Akhtar, as well as Rosemary Suarez. And our project was also mentored by Adam Friedgood, who used to teach courses here at the Sustainability Management Master's Program. So to go over what we'll review from our project, we're going to just quickly go through the purpose statement, then give you all a look into the framework and city overview that we used to devise our project. Then we'll discuss our methodology for constructing the project, the results that we received from our work, and some of our limitations, as well as our conclusions. So the project purpose statement is really the foundation for the entire concept of the project that we took on. Basically, and I'll read it just from the slide, Hoboken has a vested interest in sustainability. The city is making extensive progress in areas related to infrastructure, energy, emissions, and more, but it lacks reporting on socioeconomic issues. Creating a Sustainable Development Goal Index and Dashboard in coordination with organizations like the United Nations Association of the United States of America offers Hoboken a framework to benchmark performance and puts the city in alignment with state, national, and global goals. Hoboken can use this framework to set new priorities for the near future, and by addressing new issues, whether socioeconomic or otherwise, Hoboken can expand upon diversity, equity, and inclusion, enhance social welfare, increase economic prosperity, draw outside investment, and strengthen resilience. So for the framework and city overview, kind of building atop of that foundation. Basically, in 2015, all of the United Nations member states adopted the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. I'm sure anyone in the SM program has heard SDGs more than once by now. The agenda is comprised of 17 sustainable development goals. They aim to do things like end poverty, improve health and education, reduce inequality, spur economic growth, and tackle climate change. And within that, each goal has its own set of unique indicators. And indicators are basically a means to track progress on smaller components of the overall goal. So say I have the goal to save money. Well, in that case, my indicator could be how much money I've saved monthly by switching from Starbucks to K-Cups every morning. And more than that, the SDG index and dashboard provide two ways to measure a city's, state, or a country's performance in each indicator, and then use that data to determine if they're on track to accomplish their 2030 goals. We wanted to measure Hoboken's performance on select indicators and create an index and dashboard to illustrate the city's current standing for each SDG, and then create suggestions for the city to move forward with. So we'll explain how the index and dashboard work momentarily. So why did we feel Hoboken could benefit from this type of benchmarking? Well, per reports such as like the city's master plan, Hoboken is struggling with the following issues. And we believe an index and dashboard offer a methodology to monitor them and then set the foundation for a more data-driven approach to address upon them and then improve them. So the issues are around things like socioeconomics, land use development, transportation, open space, recreation and community, and infrastructure and sustainability. And all of these issues are kind of prominent for a lot of metropolitan or urban, heat spots anywhere around the country. So our methodology for this project. On the data side of things, there were two phases. So in phase one, we selected the indicators we would score Hoboken upon. There's a total of 231 indicators, and given our time and resource constraints, we had to narrow that down to an amount that we could reasonably analyze within about maybe 2 semesters. So first, we eliminated indicators that were irrelevant to Hoboken. For example, one indicator measures a city on the upkeep of its dams, and that doesn't really apply to Hoboken. Then we would search for indicators with data that's published on a regular basis to ensure Hoboken's progress could be monitored frequently. Our framework divides its standards based on 2020 regional and global data. So we also wanted 5 data points for each indicator, ideally such that our timeline for data would be from 2016 to 2020. And then in phase 2, after choosing the indicators to proceed with, we had to acquire data for each. Our resources needed to be credible and primarily consisted of things like Hoboken's website and representatives, the United States Census, and other reputable public resources. So in the end, we narrowed down our study to about 25 indicators, which were spread across 10 sustainable development goals. With the indicators and their data in tow, we could develop the index and dashboard. So what is an SDG index? Well, its purpose is to score Hoboken out of 100 for each of the main sustainable development goals. Basically, an SDG's score is determined based on the average of its individual indicator scores. The first step in this process is to construct an SDG index, or the first part of constructing an SDG index is to convert raw data to a scale of 0 to 100 to create uniformity across indicators. Raw data was normalized using the min-max calculation, which is shown on this section of the slide over here to the right. In this calculation, the minimum and maximum values represent the least acceptable value and the most acceptable value for an indicator. For this study, the minimum and maximum values were standards set by the state of New Jersey. The next step here is to take the average of each score for the indicators in the same sustainable development goal, and that gives you that goal's final score. Now the SDG dashboard. The purpose of this is to measure Hoboken's progress towards its 2030 goals. So whereas the index monitors a city's progress at the goal level, the dashboard tracks each individual indicator's annual trends. This is done with something called the 4-arrow system, which was defined by the 2021 SDG index and dashboard methodology. Basically, an indicator's data values for 5 consecutive years are plotted on a graph similar to the one you see here to the top right. Then the linear equation is placed on that graph, and the slope in the line's equation is used to determine what the data value for that metric will be by 2030. The rate derived from this slope is compared to the rate needed to achieve the indicator's 2030 goal. The following arrows represent 4 possible trends. We could see that an SDG is on track or maintaining achievement, moderately improving, stagnating, or decreasing. So that's our methodology. And with that, we can move into our results, which are more so the meat and potatoes of this presentation. So this is the SDG index. And with this, we find that there is a common trend wherein sustainable development goals that involve public health, sustainable infrastructure, resources, and economic standing perform moderately to exceedingly well. When goals have more interplay between social and economic factors, scores appear to decrease. We think that systemic inequalities regarding gender, race, and income level begin to permeate here. So one thing to note is that we were unable to analyze each indicator for every sustainable development goal. So as a result, these indicator scores do not reflect the totality of Hoboken's performance for each goal. For example, Hoboken scored, I think, a 0 for SDG 5. Sorry, my cat's coming into my room again. But Hoboken scored a 0 for SDG 5 based on the average score of SDG 5's indicators that were analyzed within the study. So that's here. And unfortunately, given our time and resource constraints, we were only able to measure one indicator for this particular goal. And that was the representation of women within Hoboken's workforce. So although Hoboken has a relatively diverse workforce, the city's female representation is only at 76%. And in 2020, that technically underperformed relative to the standards put in place by the state of New Jersey, which they would like to be 91% or higher. With this in mind, we think the SDG dashboard provides more valuable insight to contextualize these numbers. So with that in mind, we'll move on to the dashboard without hesitation. So we chose to divide our dashboard into 3 ways to highlight indicators with high performance, adequate performance, and poor performance. So we can discuss the first category, which is indicators to maintain performance. These are represented differently than the rest, and that's because they are the most numerous and need the least adjustment. These are all indicators that are on track to achieve the United Nations 2030 goals, and they are largely concerned with economic standing, public policies, citizens, health, infrastructure, and environmental quality. We think that the success of these programs is largely attributed to things such as Wellness Wednesday, Vision Zero, Rebuild by Design, and Hoboken's water main replacement project going on this year. For indicators like these, our team basically suggested to Hoboken that they just continue to expand upon these programs to stay on track for 2030 goal achievement. Now, this section pertains to indicators with adequate performance. These are more readily able to be improved upon by 2030 if action plans are developed accordingly. So the first indicator we have here is 8.1, or rather the employment to population ratio. This was steadily increasing until 2020, and then it decreased, likely due to COVID-19. We felt that aiding those displaced from jobs should be a priority. So we recommended to Hoboken that they partner with Stevens Institute of Technology to conduct job fairs and invest in green jobs. Recent studies suggest green jobs are driving forces in increased employment rates, and Hoboken could also hire displaced workers for municipal jobs, which provides stability and job security. At the time of this presentation's creation and in general, our capstone project, the Inflation Reduction Act, was not yet put in place. So we think that this indicator should flourish now more than ever, given that the Inflation Reduction Act was passed only mere weeks ago, which is quite exciting. As for indicator 10.8, this is the percentage of people living in high poverty neighborhoods. We think that Hoboken should create more mixed use development sites and affordable housing throughout the city, rather than concentrating affordable housing in just one area. Offering more social welfare programs and better informing citizens of their existence would also greatly improve this indicator and others. And this should include more multilingual campaigns to drive awareness to all ethnic communities in Hoboken. Now, SDG 11.1 pertains to exposure to air pollution. We feel that Hoboken can reduce air pollution by implementing ordinances around construction sites to settle the dust and reduce particulate matter that's produced. As for the percent of the rent burden population, SDG 11.4, We think that to help reduce the rent burden population, we suggest the city reconsider allowing landlords to match inflation rates for multiple years in one increase. The general population has yet to recover from COVID-19, and increasing rent prices to reflect inflation rates would likely set many renters back in terms of financial security. As for SDG 16.3, or voter turnout, this was increasing until 2020 and then declined. Again, this is another metric that likely decreased due to COVID-19, but also general confusion with mail-in voting. So we think to help improve voter turnout, Hoboken can require landlords to pass out registration forms to new tenants, and the city can also provide citizens with more educational material that reinforces their trust in the new voting system. Now, this final category of the dashboard includes indicators that Hoboken should address at future points of growth. These are all important things that Hoboken should be working on concurrently, but these are items that will require much more time and resources and more teams to kind of spearhead together. So the first one would be SDG 1.4, or the percent of families receiving temporary assistance for needy families, or TANF. This statistic was found to be extremely low. We were unable to acquire data on this at the Hoboken level and relied upon Hudson County data to fill the blanks. So first, we advise Hoboken to conduct a study to determine the percentage of families receiving TANF, and then also, if more people could benefit from the program, Hoboken should distribute resources and create channels for more families to apply. As for women in the labor force, SDG 5.1, Hoboken received a normalized score of 0 for women in the labor force. We suggest Hoboken provides more educational courses and general resources in secondary schools to better prepare women for higher education in the workforce. Now, as for SDG 8.4, this pertains to the annual growth rate for real GDP. This decreased in 2020, likely due to the pandemic as well. Hoboken could conduct a materiality assessment to determine its assets, weaknesses, and areas of concern for internal and external stakeholders. With this information, Hoboken can create a detailed roadmap to plan its next steps. Now, these are the last three indicators as part of the dashboard. So for Hoboken's unemployment rate, this dropped in 2020, also likely due to, or rather it increased in 2020, likely due to COVID-19. We feel this metric will balance out with time, but strategies suggested to improve other SDGs, for example, like the employment to population ratio, will help improve this area as well. So keeping in mind things like job fairs, green jobs, and municipal job openings as well. For SDG 10.1, that pertains to Hoboken's Gini coefficient, it is currently higher than the state average. Hoboken could improve the Gini coefficient through some of the same measures recommended for other indicators. For example, providing affordable housing and requiring developers to maintain a percentage of their new developments as affordable would encourage citizens to mix together and kind of create more economic prosperity. For SDG 11.6, that pertains to racial disparity and homelessness. Unfortunately, this has been increasing since 2017, and to help mitigate this, we think Hoboken needs to ensure that landlords are not discriminating against its applicants. Again, providing affordable housing, creating mixed-use developments, and spreading awareness of welfare programs will improve this metric. And again, although most of these final categories of indicators require more time and resources, these last three in particular really illustrate that if you work on other assets or facets of the city that have problems, there's typically a domino effect where it can also improve these things as well. So our project was not without limitations. It was most certainly not bulletproof. So there were many things that limited our analysis, such as data. We lacked a lot of data pertaining to Hoboken and Hudson County, which set back what indicators we could work with or whether we use data at the city or county level. We were also unable to weigh the interdependence of issues. In terms of scaling, there were problems with local boundaries, and the city and county can only control so much of what these indicators might pertain to. This is also the first SDG creation for a small city in the United States, so we didn't have a lot of things to reference for this project. And there were just quite a few externalities. We had to work around the Stevens semester timeline, the Hoboken representatives' pretty rigid schedules, and the impacts of COVID-19 on our data. Now, these were some SWOT analyses that we created to kind of just measure the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats of each of the SDGs. We won't go through each of them. It's quite a laundry list, but we can send this presentation out to whoever would like to see it to get more insight on each of these for all of the goals. And for the most important part, so we're going to quickly review our conclusions. So to give an overview of the index, there was positive performance for things pertaining to health, education, and water, moderate performance for things pertaining to the economy, equity, infrastructure, and justice, and then poor performance in gender and work-related goals. For the dashboard, there was positive performance for economic, public policy, health, infrastructure, and environmental quality-related indicators, moderate performance for employment, housing, and election-related indicators, and poor performance for social welfare, gender equality, unemployment rate, racial disparity, and homelessness-related indicators. Now, these are just recommendations that we've kind of bottled up into primary categories for Hoboken to try to work on or use this data to improve upon. So we just think that Hoboken needs to work on a better system of gathering and collecting data, a open database to just make better distinctions between city, county, and state data, to better store it and to budget who is in charge of different levels of data and the capacity and resources they have to gauge future projects. So we maybe also suggest that they try to become an MSA or a metropolitan statistical area to combine with Newark, Jersey City, and New York to better assess their limitations, levels of control, and resources to work on new future projects for the SDGs. To also partner with Stevens classes and UNA USA to conduct a voluntary local review or to expand the research done in this study. We also think that Hoboken should modify the indicators descriptions for some of these SDGs so that they're better suited to Hoboken's capabilities, and also adjust their descriptions so that if they're already meeting their 2030 goals, Hoboken can challenge themselves to meet new, more ambitious goals. We also think that Hoboken can start to set their own time frame. If 2030 is not feasible, it might be threatening to set a goal for that timeline at all. So to expand the deadline would be more realistic to their expectations and resources. We also think that the municipality should work on assigning ownership of indicators to specific departments or teams so that there's more accountability. The city can also distribute a survey to acquire public input and determine how the stakeholders in terms of the inhabitant level or what they prioritize and what they want to see done in the city. And we also think Hoboken can just do more to update stakeholders annually and show where progress on each SDG is and how they intend to improve in the future. So this is kind of just the so what of it all. And we think that by addressing SDGs and monitoring performance through an index and dashboard, Hoboken acquires a centralized hub to monitor their performance in alignment with state and national benchmarking. In addition, Hoboken can expect a roadmap to lead them towards urban equitable development. The city can obtain value in a few ways. So first, there is social value through increased inclusion, by also addressing social issues through a bottom-up approach that requires the local community's involvement. Hoboken can create social programs to address ongoing issues. This is fundamental to improving equity and diversity. Next, Hoboken can expect economic growth through citywide investments as companies and organizations with increased awareness regarding corporate social responsibility will want to invest in a city that is making positive improvements towards sustainable development. This can also provide economic development that can also circle back to target social issues such as rent burden through low-cost housing. And lastly, there is environmental value, especially for a coastal city like Hoboken, in addressing more environmental indicators related to climate change in order to enhance resiliency. We believe Hoboken can inspire neighboring municipalities to strive towards the same progress. And at this point,